is the talk that's Let's Learn About VNS. Cameron and Julia are here to talk about VNS with LivaNova, and Sue is here to answer you guys' medical-based questions. There are still people to come. We will continue on though till some of them will be late. If you guys there will be an open question period after Cameron's presentation. But if you have any questions during, you can send them to me and or Cameron, and I can unmute you and you guys can ask. You guys will all be muted when the presentation is happening, just so that there's no background feedback, interruptions, or anything of the such. Yeah.
So, super. Okay. As I say, before I get started, I need to say a few things in advance. The first one is I am not a physician. I am not medical. Sue Rahey has very graciously joined us on this call so that she can chime in for medical questions, and I'm more than happy to defer to her for those. But I can certainly take many of the technical questions around VNS therapy. And indeed, this talk is designed to hopefully address most of those questions, but I'm sure there's a few that I have missed. So let's jump in. The idea here is to talk about how we can advance treatment for specifically drug-resistant epilepsy, not just epilepsy. And so I think the first thing we have to address is, what exactly does drug-resistant epilepsy mean? Well, a person living with epilepsy is considered to have drug-resistant epilepsy if they have tried multiple treatments and their seizures have not been controlled, or the side effects of medication that maybe are providing some control can't be tolerated. So drug-resistant epilepsy is a term that means you've tried lots of things, but you can't stay on the meds, or they're just not working for you. And the message is that there are other types of treatments available. The thing to know as well is that overall, there's more than 50 million people worldwide who are living with epilepsy, and about 35%, or 1 in 3, have seizures that are very difficult to treat. So if someone is told that they have drug-resistant epilepsy, they're not alone. There's actually a lot of people in a similar condition, which means that it is an area of a lot of research. So having drug-resistant epilepsy obviously is not great news, but the good news is that there is lots and lots of research and funding that goes along with that research into trying to find better treatments and ideally cures. With the diagnosis of drug-resistant epilepsy, there's a change in treatment goals. Obviously, first and foremost, we would like to try and have all seizures go away, to have them completely stopped. But when someone has drug-refractory epilepsy, of course, we're still trying to eliminate seizures, but we talk more about reducing the number of seizures as opposed to completely eliminating them. Along with that, we want to try and reduce the intensity of seizures. So if seizures are still going to occur, can we reduce the severity or intensity of them? Can we also minimize or eliminate some of the side effects of treatment? So if you find one medication that works really well, but the side effects are horrible, well, that's not much of a medication really. So can we find a treatment that doesn't have a lot of side effects, or the side effects are minimal? Also, when we're talking about seizures, can we improve the recovery period so that if a seizure occurs, the person can get back to their baseline a lot faster? And overall, can we improve quality of life for the individual? So these are the treatment goals that we're thinking about when we think about how a treatment for drug-refractory epilepsy might work. So what are those treatments? Well, there are always more medications. There's quite a number of medications out there available, over 20 of them. And when you trial them in combinations, it could take a very long time to work through all of them. Now, obviously not every medication is appropriate for every person or every type of seizure, but there's certainly lots and lots of options. But beyond medications, there's something called ketogenic diet. And some of you may be familiar with ketogenic diet, may have tried it, may still be on it for all I know. But it has had some success. Of course, there is brain surgery for those who are candidates, and not everyone is a candidate for brain surgery, but brain surgery can offer a cure as opposed to some of these other treatments. And then there's VNS therapy, and that's where I'm going to restrict my remarks. Will just be to VNS therapy. So VNS actually stands for vagus nerve, and then the S is for stimulation. So vagus nerve is a nerve that runs, there's two of them actually, left vagus nerve and a right vagus nerve, and they run down either side of the neck. And we're interested in the one on the left side. And so vagus nerve stimulation is designed specifically for people living with drug-resistant epilepsy, and it's a proven long-term solution that's being used by more than 100,000 people around the world. The goal of VNS therapy is to prevent seizures before they start and stop them if they do. Now, in Canada, and I am quite careful about saying this is Canadian specific because different rules and regulations exist for different regions. So if you're not living in Canada, you would need to check your local rules. But the indications for use in Canada are shown here on the screen. The VNS therapy system is indicated for use as an adjunctive therapy. Adjunctive means additional. So in addition to medications or maybe diet or even surgery, if you've had surgery or you're potentially considering surgery. So it's adjunctive, it's with these other treatments to reduce the frequency of seizures in people whose epilepsy disorder is dominated by partial seizures with or without secondary generalization or generalized seizures that are refractory to seizure medications. And it's important to know that funding is provided under provincial healthcare plans. So this isn't something that, that an individual needs to pay for. It's covered in Canada by our local provincial healthcare plan. So VNS therapy has improved the overall quality of life for people living with drug-resistant epilepsy, and those benefits can include fewer seizures, in some cases completely stopping seizures, but more likely just being able to reduce the total number, shorter seizures, a faster recovery, decreased seizure severity, fewer medications, potentially, and with that, maybe reduced dosages of those medications, even if you don't stop one completely. Improved alertness, mood, and memory, and overall improved quality of life. But it's not the same as a drug. It's not a drug. It's different from a drug, and its action is different, and its time frame is a lot longer. And when we talk about that, we need to think not in terms of a month or even 3 months. Most drugs, the effect is well known within the first few weeks or months at the latest, whereas VNS therapy may take a couple of years before its true effect is being shown. And that's what I'm showing in this slide, this particular picture. And I don't want to show a lot of data, that's not my goal today, but I think it is important to look at some data. And this is looking at a group of 65 patients who were followed for at least 10 years. And it shows us the reduction in seizures over time. And the important thing to note is that, let's say at 1 year, you see here, this group of patients, this group of people experienced a 52% seizure reduction at 1 year. But by 4 years, 60% of their seizures had gone away. And by 8 years, 76% of the seizures had gone away. So you can see that the the benefit is cumulative. It grows over time. So the longer that you're exposed to VNS therapy, the greater the magnitude of effect. When we look at some of the quality of life improvements, and this is over just 4 years of VNS therapy, we can see that there's an effect on thinking. You see that 63% of people who had VNS felt that there was an improvement in their alertness. Memory was improved in 37%, mood in almost 50%, verbal communication, 45%, achievements, this is school achievements or work achievements, improved in 38%. Now, beyond that, we see that there is an effect on seizures, as we talked about. 56% of people felt there was reduced clustering of seizures. 62% felt there was a faster recovery, so that overall, 77% of people who had VNS therapy felt that they were getting quality of life benefits. So I think we need to, it's important obviously to talk a lot about the effect on seizures, but we need to talk about the other part of it as well, and that's just the day-to-day living, and that's an important part of it. Now, with VNS therapy, studies have shown that there are fewer emergency department visits. There are decreased number of hospitalizations. In fact, it's a 2-fold reduction in seizure-related hospitalizations, a 3-fold reduction in status epilepticus occurrence. Should you be hospitalized, there's a decreased length of hospital stay. Fewer seizure-related clinic visits occur, and overall, there's fewer missed work and working days. And of course, that's not just for the person with drug refractory epilepsy, but it's also for the family that supports that person. So if you have take a case where there's a child who has drug refractory epilepsy and they are required to get hospital assistance associated with every seizure, it's not just the person, not just the 10-year-old that's going to the hospital. Of course, it's a parent or parents, or maybe parents and siblings. So a lot of people, as everyone well knows, may be affected by seizure occurrence. So if we can reduce those seizures that require medical attention, overall, there's many fewer missed work or working days. So where does VNS fit in to the treatment regimen? It's not something we start with. It's not what we call a first-line therapy. This is looking at these options and the goals. And of course, the first thing is your first drug, one anti-epileptic drug trial, or what we call monotherapy. And if that doesn't succeed in stopping seizures without side effects, then we may go on to a second trial. And this could be on its own or in combination with the first medication. And if that one doesn't achieve our goal of no seizures and ideally no side effects, then it's important for that person to go to a comprehensive epilepsy center, such as the Queen Elizabeth II Health Science Center in Halifax, or the IWK Children's Hospital in Halifax, to get a complete workup. And from there, we look at other options. If a person is considered to be a surgical candidate, well, then that option can be presented to them. But surgery isn't always an option. It might be that there is no one single part of the brain that is the source or the starting point of the seizure. It can't be, we can't isolate it down to one area that makes it a surgical option. Or it might be that we can find that spot, but it's so close to another important part of the brain, say something that's involved in language, for example, that we would be concerned of damaging that part of the brain. So we would be reluctant to maybe go in. Now, surgical research is also occurring. It's improving all the time, and our techniques are improving, which means more people may be eligible for surgery than, say, 10 years ago. But even so, there are people who will still not be eligible for surgery. And for them, we have to think about other options. And so that could include things like VNS therapy and the ketogenic diet, either alone or in combination, or indeed there are other options as well. But it's when we get into this box here at the bottom that we see a change in our treatment goals, where we're trying to optimize seizure control, minimize the severity of the seizures, improve quality of life, reduce side effects. And then this last one, ensure adherence, that you stick to the treatment that seems to be working for you. And that's an important part of it as well. So as I mentioned, VNS therapy is not a drug, and therefore it doesn't have the same side effects. Now, it does have some side effects, and I will talk about that in a few slides from now, but it doesn't have the same side effects, nor does it interact with other medications. So sometimes if one medication is being used and the healthcare professional wants to add another medication to it, they may not work well together, or you may have to change the dosing of one or the other to get the right combination so that you can get maximum benefit or maximum effect. With VNS therapy, we don't have to worry about that because it's working through a different mechanism and not the same way that the medication may be working. So VNS therapy can be used, as I said before, in addition to medications and other treatment options. So let's just talk about how it works. VNS therapy is delivered through a device, and that is comprised of two main pieces, something we call a generator, which is shown here, and a lead or a wire, which is shown here, that goes from the generator up to the vagus nerve here, which is on, as I said earlier, on the left side of the neck. And this generator sends out mild pulses that travels through the wire to the nerve. And those pulses travel up the nerve to the brain, where it may be able to suppress those bits of the brain that may be associated with seizures. Now this stimulation, these pulses, are delivered in bursts all day, all night, every day, automatically, in an effort to control seizures. And it's important that this is automatic. There's nothing that the person needs to do to initiate treatment or instigate treatment. It's going all the time. It is a surgical procedure. It is a small surgical procedure, but it is still a surgical procedure, and the person must undergo general anesthetic. So you go into the operating room and you're put to sleep while this procedure is being done. But it's a short procedure. It only takes about an hour, hour and a half usually, and most people can go home same day or next day. Depends on the protocols of the hospital. They may wish to keep a person in overnight for observation and send them home the next day. Now it involves two small incisions, one in the chest area where the generator is going to be, and another one in the neck area to get access to the vagus nerve, because all of this is going to be implanted under the skin. But as you can see in this picture, this is not brain surgery. We're not getting anywhere near the brain. In fact, the electrodes don't even make it above the chin. They're below the level of the chin. And this is an important thing, I think, because I sincerely hope that in the not too distant future, there'll be advances in surgery for epilepsy, new types of brain surgery, and I don't know what those may be, but I hope that there's new advances in surgery that means more people can have perhaps curative surgery, surgery that results in stopping the epilepsy. And if there was anything, prior surgery, wires, whatever it might be, that would somehow impact on the ability to perform that surgery, I think that would be very sad. And so the fact that this does not get anywhere near the brain means that the brain is accessible for potential future surgery. And I really think that's an important point to mention. Now, as I said, after surgery, it's not a long procedure. You go home. The incisions will recover, typically in a few weeks. So in this picture, we can see the generator and the electrodes here on the nerve and the wire connecting the two together. This is, of course, all under the skin. So as that skin heals, and this is a picture from a real patient that I'm superimposing on top of this picture, you can see there's just two small scars from that surgical procedure, and they will fade with time. But it heals up nicely, and again, it goes nowhere near the brain. Now, I did say that there are some side effects, so let's talk about those now. Possible side effects of VNS therapy include hoarseness or changes in your voice, potentially some coughing, a tickling sensation in the throat or on the neck, and sometimes a feeling of shortness of breath. And what this graph below is showing is the occurrence of these typical side effects over time. So the purple shows us the amount it might happen in the first year, green is second year, blue is third year. So the important thing is that the incidence of these events is relatively small, and it gets less with time. The other thing to note is that these side effects that I've mentioned here typically only occur while the device is stimulating and not when the device is not stimulating. So a common way of using the device is to have it stimulate for 30 seconds and then it turns off for 5 minutes and rests. So if there are any side effects felt, typically they would only occur during the 30 seconds of stimulation and not during the longer 5-minute period of rest. So how do we decide how this is going to be used? Well, that's through follow-up with your healthcare professional. And this is where Susan Rahey comes in, because this is part of what she does. We use a computer system to change the settings of the implanted device. So it's a tablet, as you can see here in the picture, and a separate piece that communicates to the implanted device under the skin. There's nothing that is felt during that communication. It's just sending signals back and forth, kind of like your phone might receive signals. There's nothing that is felt with that communication, but it allows the changing of the settings of the device. And so over the first few months of therapy after surgery, there's some fairly intensive follow-up where the settings are adjusted to increase its effectiveness that are particular for that one person. So we want to set the device to the best settings for that person. And this can be done in clinic, and more recently with the newest model, it can be set up to be done automatically. So you still come back frequently, but some changes can occur without having to come into the hospital. But once the settings are optimized, then it's just normal routine follow-up where the device and the battery life of the device can be monitored, and we make sure everything's working appropriately. So that's setting up the device. Now, what's the device actually doing? There are 3 ways that it stimulates. And the first one I've already talked about, and we call that normal mode. And the common stimulation setting is 30 seconds of stimulation and 5 minutes of resting. And this continues to cycle on and off, as I said, all day, all night, every day, automatically. And we can change that sequencing to best meet the person's needs. But that's usually where we start, 30 seconds on, 5 minutes off. But there's another option, and this is called magnet mode. So we provide magnets to the person, and you see this gentleman here is wearing one that's attached to a wristband. There's another version that has a belt clip, and we provide one of each. And the idea behind the magnet is the magnet can be just swiped over the implanted device to trigger right then and there an extra stimulation, because that might be able to stop the seizure, or at least reduce its intensity. And so the idea behind the magnet is to try and give the person or their caregiver, be it a parent or a sibling or someone else, a little control over the seizures, so that by using the magnet, we may be able to affect the seizure that's in progress. Unfortunately, sometimes the magnet can't be used. So, for example, someone who has a seizure during their sleep probably is not going to wake up in time to be able to find the magnet and use it. I mean, it would work if we could, but more often the opportunity is missed. In some people, there's no warning that a seizure is coming on, and so there's no opportunity, there's no time, not enough time to use the magnet. Some people may be incapable of applying the magnet. That might be because of the effects of the seizure itself. It's possible that the magnet is misplaced. In fact, one of the stories I've heard, and if you've ever heard me talk before, you've probably heard this story before, but people will, or families will say, okay, we need to know where the magnet is at all times. And more often than not, it's put on the refrigerator in the kitchen because it sticks to the fridge. And that's a great place to keep it. Everyone knows where it is. And if the person only has their seizures in the kitchen, then it's perfect. But if you happen to be anywhere else in the house or outside of the house, then it's not very convenient because the magnet's not close to hand. And that's why we provide the magnet with either a wristband or a clip so that you can put it on your belt or around your wrist so that it's always available. And it can be used by the person themselves, or as you see in this picture, by a parent or a sibling or a caregiver or whoever. So the magnet can work really well if it's used, and there's opportunities where it may not be used. So because of that, we have come out with a new model that has something called auto-stimulation. And the idea behind auto-stimulation is it's going to act like the magnet mode without having to use the magnet. And it's based on heart rate, because 8 out of 10 people have a sudden increase in their heart rate at the time of a seizure. So suddenly their heart rate starts beating quickly in conjunction with a seizure. The device will recognize that and deliver an extra dose of stimulation right at that moment, as if we'd used the magnet, but we didn't need to use the magnet because the device detected it all by itself. So that's the auto-stim mode. And the benefits of it, of course, is it might be able to stop the seizure or shorten the seizure. It may be able to decrease the intensity of the seizure and shorten the recovery period after the seizure. So I want to show you a couple of images here. This is from one person who was in the seizure monitoring unit. It's a 21-year-old gentleman who's had no previous surgery, but he's been tried on 4 or more anti-epileptic medications. And the upper image is taken before he had his VNS implanted. The lower one is taken after he had his VNS implanted. So we're looking at the patient as if we were standing behind them. So this is the back of the head here. You can see the ears, back of the head. And we're going to look at what how the seizure progresses without stimulation, and then when the patient comes back and has the device implanted and it automatically stimulates at the time of a seizure. So let me run this. And what you'll see in both is that the seizure starts on the left side of the patient's head, but quickly, without stimulation, wraps around the entire head. So this becomes a generalized seizure. With acute stimulation, it stays on the left side and it ends very, very quickly. Whereas without that stimulation, it's still progressing, it's still ongoing. In fact, when we compare the two over here on the left side of the screen, we see that with therapy, the duration of the seizure is almost cut in half. The duration of the rapid heart rate is significantly reduced. The peak heart rate, how fast the heart was racing, is much less with stimulation. And the seizure, which had spread around basically the whole brain beforehand, now becomes very localized or very focalized or contained in just one small area. And because it doesn't spread as much, it tends to end faster and wrap up more quickly. So that's what the stimulation can do when it's applied right at the time of a seizure. It can minimize the results of that seizure and make it end sooner and reduce some of the associated effects with it as well. In fact, what we have seen is with this automatically triggered therapy, something we call responsive VNS, we see that more people get benefit from the therapy than those who don't have responsive VNS. So this is traditional VNS, and this is with responsive VNS. Furthermore, the benefit occurs earlier. So in an older study, we saw that after 5 years, 64% of the people had been able to eliminate at least half of their seizures. But using responsive VNS in just over a year, almost the same number of people, 59%, had achieved the same goal of reducing at least half their seizures. And reducing seizures is really, really important. Obviously, a seizure is a horrible thing to experience, but beyond that, we know that there's something called SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And there are risk factors for SUDEP, which include seizures occurring during sleep. There is an age bracket between 20 and 50 when people are trying to be more independent, where there's perhaps a higher incidence of SUDEP because they may be on their own. We know that people living with drug-resistant epilepsy are at a greater risk for SUDEP. And we know that a high seizure burden, especially generalized seizures, may have a role in increasing the risk of SUDEP. So if VNS can reduce the total number of seizures and make generalized seizures more likely to be contained as a focal seizure, does it have an effect on SUDEP? And that research has been done as well. So this was a study that was done on over 40,000 people, and it looked at the historic rate of SUDEP in a population with drug refractory epilepsy. And that number was 5.9 deaths due to SUDEP per 1,000 patient years. Okay, the important thing here is what happens when we apply VNS therapy. Well, over the first 2 years of VNS therapy, that number is more than cut in half, down to 2.5. And then beyond that, years 3 to 10, it's further reduced down to 1.7. So we're seeing an impact by reducing seizures, reducing the risk for SUDEP. Now, as I mentioned, this system is comprised of the generator, which is a battery, and the wire or the lead that connects the battery up to the nerve. That battery doesn't last forever, just like any battery, be it in your watch or in a flashlight or whatever it may be. Batteries need replacing. So this battery typically lasts somewhere between, say, 5 and 8 years. It depends on how the device needs to be set to maximize the seizure control. But when it comes time to replace it, the surgery is much simpler than the initial one. It's only one small incision in the chest area, which is where the battery is. We want to take that existing device out of from underneath the skin, take it off the wire, put a new one on, tuck it back in, and sew it up. So only the generator gets replaced, not the wire as well. So it's a shorter, faster procedure when a replacement's required. And as I say, that's typically going to occur every 5 to 8 years or so, depending on how the device is being used. So in summary, VNS therapy is safe. More than 100,000 people worldwide have received VNS therapy. There are no known interactions with medications or any foods. VNS therapy can be combined with other treatments like diet and medications and even surgery. And I think it's important also to mention that pregnancies have gone to term while a person has been receiving VNS therapy with no issues to the baby. With a VNS implanted, you can still have medical procedures like MRI, for example, but it's important because there's something implanted in you that you need to let everyone know that there's a device implanted. So the person who gets a VNS device needs to ensure that any medical treatment occurs around the fact that they have a device implanted. So you check with your healthcare professional before having an MRI or any other medical procedure. Now we're going to move into some questions and hopefully some answers, if I can. And if I can't, I know Sue can. But for more information, discuss VNS therapy with a treating healthcare professional. There's also information to be gleaned from the local Epilepsy Patient Association. And via the web as well, there's some information. You can see the web address there, vnstherapy.co.uk, takes you to the website in England. England has the same indications for use as Canada, which is why I suggest you look at that one because it's very similar. And on that website, there are some patient testimonials you see down here. And if you go into those patient testimonials, you'll hear some people talking about their experiences with VNS therapy. Now, I'll just put this up for a moment as well. I think it's important that we do address that there is safety information around VNS therapy. Excuse me. Excuse me. Indications, we already talked about that. There are some contraindications, warnings, adverse events. I've covered most of this information, but this is the official documents, and this can be found on the website as well. And so with that, I'll thank you for listening to me, and I will stop sharing my screen, and perhaps we can open up lines, Cassidy, and start addressing any questions that may have occurred.
Awesome.
Oh, many more people joined us too.
Yes, lots of people joined in. Thank you,
Lovely.
Cameron, so much for your presentation. Very informative, very educational. No questions came through during.
Okay.
But some questions prior to the talk have come through for both you and Sue. I'm sorry. One of the question things is there any pain when the VNS first goes off? For the very first time, what does it feel like?
So I can take that one, Cass.
Yeah, please, Susan.
So yes, it can be painful because it's a sensation that you haven't felt before. But I'm not talking about extreme pain here. I'm talking about a dull ache. If the stimulation parameters are set high enough, you can certainly have a little more pain than that. It can go up behind the ear. But these things are easily adjusted with changes in the parameters. So, for example, when we first implant a patient, we don't send them home until we're sure that they're tolerating those parameters. And anytime the parameters are changed, the same thing. We always make sure the patient can tolerate the parameters because we can adjust them. There's no need to suffer pain with VNS, no need at all, okay?
Thanks, Susan.
Awesome. Deidre has a question. If you want to, I'm just unmuting her.
Yeah.
It's for an endoscopy, and I mean, I know, that I was told I could, in order to turn the device off, I could tape the magnet over that, so I mean, I'm okay doing that. I have a couple of concerns though. One is to secure it well enough when I'm getting the procedure done. And the second thing is, given the situation with, and I'm just not sure, I mean, it's COVID time and I have no idea when I'm going to get this procedure done now. But I guess the thing was, this sounds like a really stupid question, but is there any type of tape or anything that I should be using Do you know what I mean? To secure it properly.
So let me address the first part, and then I'll hand it over to Susan. The first thing is, I talked about the magnet, and the magnet can be passed over the device to provide extra stimulation. If you leave it in place, it temporarily stops stimulation. So as long as the magnet stays there, it stops all stimulation. So we can temporarily stop it. As soon as you take the magnet away, it goes back to its normal function. So that's where the question's coming from. If you're going through for a medical procedure, do we need to put the magnet over to stop its stimulation during that procedure? And if so, how do we keep it there? And that's where tape can be applied. Now, Susan, I mean, you've got experience with this. Typically, the magnet would be taped in place at the hospital where the surgery is going to occur, and they would use an appropriate tape, like a paper tape or something like that, that's not going to bother the skin. But maybe you've got some other insight.
Well, it can take place at the hospital, or the patient can do it before going in. I mean, you know what kind of tape your skin can tolerate. The hospital doesn't care what kind of tape you use. They will use paper tape if you go in there without having your magnet taped in place. But I think, Deirdre, I mean, we've had people go through major bowel surgery with the magnet taped on, so I'm pretty sure what you're going through will not be an issue of the magnet moving, okay?
Right. I just have one other comment to add. You had mentioned different medical procedures. One, just from my own experience, for dental cleaning, if they use, like, there's two different types of things for removing plaque, and there's one, it's a sonic type, it's that particular frequency interferes with the VNS device versus the other type. So
the short answer is no, it shouldn't interfere at all. But the long answer is, to be safe, tape a magnet over for the duration of the procedure. To be safe, and I think being safe is always the wise thing. Tape the magnet in place. At the end, when you're finished in the dentist chair, take the tape off and the magnet off, and you're back to normal.
Just personal experience.
Go ahead, Susan.
I think Cameron is giving you very good advice here, okay? There are lots of things you could say, oh, I don't know if this will harm it or if that will harm it. Just do it. Just put the magnet over it. It will not hurt you. It will not hurt the device, and it may save you a lot of trouble in future.
Yeah.
That was a great question, Deidre. And there are no, just one thing you said, there's no stupid questions. We're all learning here.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to put that right quick. Before we go into a different question, though, was there anything, Sue, you wanted to touch on or add to Cameron's presentation?
There was one thing, and this has come up, I think this is actually the third presentation that's involved VNS that I've been involved with in the last week. It's really quite amazing. So one of the things is that when you're being treated with a VNS, right, and you saw the really lovely graph that Cameron showed where over time seizure frequency is better controlled with VNS. So by the time you get out to 10 years, it's a sizable chunk of your seizures are being controlled. I just want to point out that during that 10 years, if you are being cared for in an epilepsy center, your medications are not staying the same.
Right.
We don't have a single patient who has remained on the same medication over 10 years while being treated with the VNS, because the goal of your epilepsy doctor is to improve your lot in life all the time, okay? That's their job. And if they don't do their job for 10 years, other than just change a few parameters in your VNS, then you should look for a new doctor. But so when you look at numbers like that, I want you to just think about, it's a bit more complicated than the graph shows. And I mean, I've been a proponent and fan of VNS since our first implant in 1998, or 1999, sorry. So I mean, I've never stopped thinking that VNS was a very valuable tool in this box of tools that we have to treat epilepsy. But it shouldn't just be the only one, okay? It shouldn't just be the only one. We should use everything we have in our hands to try and make your life better.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Susan. And as I mentioned earlier, it is adjunctive treatment, rather. It goes along with medications. And sure, absolutely, over 10 years, those medications should change. in many people.
Well, there's new ones all the time. Thank goodness for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for adding, clearing that up. Another question is, I received was, can you still have X-rays and MRIs with having the VNS?
And the answer is absolutely. X-ray, no problem at all. I mean, you'll see the device on the X-ray. It does show up, but it doesn't mean you can't have the X-ray. MRI, you can have an MRI as well, but there is an exclusion zone for the MRI. And I can't really well show it on this, but it's sort of from the neck down a bit, sort of towards the bottom of the rib cage. So that portion cannot undergo MRI, but your head can, your pelvic area can, arms and legs, no problem. Okay. So MRI is definitely possible, yes.
So you will know, though, that there are, we've had some disagreements with our own MRI department over the years about what they would MR and what they would not. And LivaNova has been incredibly helpful with providing us with the scientific information to give to our MRI department so that they would allow this to happen. But if you are in a small community, don't expect that you will have an MRI done there, okay? You may have to travel to your epilepsy center. In fact, you will have to travel to your epilepsy center in most cases to have your VNS adjusted, turned off, so that the MRI can take place. There are other things, a bit more technical, but if you have the battery removed because the device is not working and they've left a section of the lead in your neck, that can cause the MRI people to get a little, somehow. They don't want to touch you, but as I said, we're usually pretty good at being able to provide them with the information that's necessary. This is brain MRI I'm talking about. Cameron is absolutely right. There is an exclusion zone. If you injure your back, it could be a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And a question that came from Angela prior was, how long are they good for? So, like, is it good for up to like 2 years, 5 years before they need replacement? Like, how long before they need to be replaced?
Yeah, good question. And it's hard to give an exact answer because, as I mentioned, the device gets set for the person. So we play with the settings to try and find just the right balance of stimulation and output and timing and everything else to make it perfect for that person to get the best possible results. So bearing in mind that those are going to be different for every single person, in general, we say the device lasts 5 to 8 years before it needs to be replaced.
Awesome.
So certainly more than 2 years in virtually everyone, I would think.
It depends on the parameters, obviously, right? And if the patient is on, some of you will know these terms, rapid cycling or the Corbin parameters, where the device is on a very high duty cycle. And if you think about duty cycle as just being how much juice is being sucked out of that battery every single day, right? So if you're sucking a lot of juice out of the battery every day, then the battery will die sooner than if you are on a sort of regular baseline parameters where the duty cycle is lower. So your doctor should know enough to be able to keep an eye on that. Now, with the newer batteries, it's just lovely. There's a nice little green battery thingy that shows me how the juice is being used up or how the power is being drained from that battery. The older batteries, the 102 would be the oldest one now that's still available. Or I suppose maybe somebody might have a 103 or a 104, but it'd be pretty uncommon. So if you have a 102, then I cannot tell that way. I have to just kind of figure out in my mind how long you've been on that duty cycle and roughly, based on previous experience, how long your battery is going to last. But we do, it's called prophylactic, so just we don't want to take a chance, so we will replace the battery maybe before we have any big indication. But the biggest indication from patients is when their seizures become more intense or more frequent, and then we know that battery is probably dying and we need to replace it now.
Awesome, thank you. Deidre has asked another question. She's so she can ask it.
Yeah, this is another thing that's been encountered, and I mean, and it certainly, don't get me wrong, I know that with the question that I asked, it's certainly not a problem for me to get another doctor or someone I'm dealing with who is not familiar with VNS to contact my specialist. That's not a problem. But by the same token, depending on what you're seeing someone for, if you have to go to emergency or, you know, there's things that have to be done quickly, or is there advice for individuals that have VNS, for example, things of literature or something that they could keep with them or something of that nature that's not only patient friendly, but also, you know, doctor friendly? I guess I don't want to make this sound stupid, but in other words, like a dummies 101 for VNS for individual, for, you know, doctors or people you may have to see that don't know about it at all.
So they can Google it. I mean, I can't figure this one out at all. They Google everything else. They should be able to Google VNS.
I know.
Lovely website.
Yeah. But I just thought, you know, sometimes they don't do that. So it's more for, just because I find sometimes I have to be my own advocate, not just advocate, but, you know, when I'm talking about my history, my patient history. So I'm just throwing it out there sort of as a question, comment.
Yeah, it's pretty common that most GPs and other people, other physicians out there have no idea about epilepsy, let alone VNS, and they don't know how to pronounce any of the medications we use. And so the best thing to do is tell them to call your neurologist, okay? That's the best thing. Or you can just say, Google it, and smile when you do.
Kevin had also made a comment saying that agreeing, like his doctors sometimes forget that he has a VNS and he gets booked at one place and has to be transferred to the hospital. And he but also said that always be your own advocate, and I could not agree more. You know yourself, you know your body, you know what you're feeling. So being your own advocate, having a support system is good too, but always be your own advocate. And then Lindsay has a question. If you want to unmute her. I think your computer's slow, Mom. I don't know what's happening. There you go. Okay, Lindsay, your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering where generally the vagus nerve isn't stimulated the way that it is for such a prolonged period, and it is responsible for other things that it normally, like, wouldn't it stimulate those things? Like, I think it's like resting heart rate that the vagus nerve is responsible for, and like some digestion stuff. I'm just wondering if that's been looked into, if like that constant over like so many years and for so long, if it affects those things.
I'll let you take that, Susan.
Okay, so that's why we implant on the left side, Linz, because supposedly the left side of the left vagus nerve has fewer projections to heart. So when you have this device implanted and you're in the operating room, there's a thing called the lead test. Now, the lead test takes place outside the operating room too. It should be done when you see a patient in follow-up, but we obviously do it in the operating room before closure. And that's to see what happens to the patient's heart during stimulation. Because we have had at our hospital, and when you think about the literally more than 100 patients we've implanted, only one time have we had a patient whose heart actually stopped during stimulation. So that's the purpose of the test, okay? We test in the operating room to make sure that there's no impact on heart. But it is a fascinating question. All I can say is that over time, and we have a couple of patients who've been implanted for 20 years or more now, and they haven't had any issues with their heart, and they haven't had any, well, I shouldn't say they haven't had any issues with their digestion, but it's nothing to do with the VNS. We did have Cameron alluded to this when he talked about the side effects. We did have a patient who had significant shortness of breath. It got to the point where we had to turn the device off. And we had one other patient whose sleep apnea was really exacerbated by this. And his though responded to a change in parameters. So the vagus nerve has a purpose. It's not just hanging around there like as a decoration in your neck. Yeah. But with this thing has been studied for many years, many years. And we've identified I shouldn't say we, the company has identified very specific instances where it can cause an issue. But we always check for that. And they've taught us how to respond. Is that okay, Cameron?
Absolutely, Susan. Spot on.
This is a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Really good question.
Important question.
So I have to ask the question.
Yes.
Dharmendra. Can I continue?
Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Dharmendra. I'm from India, Mumbai. I have seen your presentation, sir. And one presentation you have mentioned that VNS therapy improves the alertness by 63% and mood by 48%. So do VNS therapy have some role to play operation parameter?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last, just the last little bit. I got the 63% and all that stuff, but what was the very last part of your question?
So VNS therapy has any role to play on depression meter of any anti-epileptic patient?
Well, listen, this thing is approved for implantation in patients with depression in Canada. I don't know, Cameron can tell you what other countries, but
No,
yes,
I don't know.
but in Canada, it is approved for implantation in patients with depression. And I want to just make it clear, though, it's not everybody who feels better with VNS. The feeling better, though, can come from other things. If your seizures are shorter in duration, you don't go on to convulse every time, you feel that you can do something, right? That magnet allows you to do something. That certainly can make you feel a hell of a lot better than when you're just stuck with the seizures happening whenever they feel like it and you potentially injuring yourself. So I think this is a multi-dimensional kind of effect of the VNS. Better seizure control almost always makes you feel better.
Thank you very much.
Good question.
I have one more question to ask. Say, I will touch upon the ketogenic diet plus VNS therapy. Now there are so many anti-epileptic drugs that are available, first generation, second generation, like sodium valproate, valproic acid, oxcarbazepine, namatrazine. So patients you keep a patient on ketogenic diet and VNS therapy, and another class of patients, first or second generation of anti-epileptic and VNS therapy, which is the patients or which group of patients they got a better result with the VNS therapy.
So I think, I'm sorry, the sound is bad. It's probably my headphones, but I think you were asking, so patients who take VNS therapy and ketogenic diet versus patients who have VNS therapy and medication, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
I have almost no information or experience with ketogenic diet in adults. It's we've tried it. It's been unsuccessful in terms of the patients being able to tolerate it. So I cannot. I would not be able to say which of those two, just because I don't have any experience with ketogenic diet in adults. Cameron, can you?
Yeah, there is some limited data. There was actually I'm trying to remember when it was published. About 15 years ago, there was a small study looking at less than 20 patients, all children, who were on ketogenic diet and received VNS as well. And they found in about 2/3 of those patients, maybe a bit more, don't quote me on the numbers, very favorable outcomes. So they work well together, but all of those people were on medications as well as diet and VNS. So neither ketogenic diet nor VNS are advocated as sole treatments. They're always to be used along with medications.
Awesome.
But there's very limited experience. This study I'm talking about came out of 5 different centers, and I think when they pooled all their resources, they only found 15 or 16 patients. So it's not common, or certainly it's not reported on a lot. I think it is probably common, but it's not reported on a lot.
Good, great questions. Carrie, has a question. Also, I just want to pop in real quick. Tell Graham happy birthday. I can't remember if I sent him a message or not. I just remembered, so. I
will for sure.
Thank you. Okay. So feel free to ask away.
Okay. Finally figured out how to do it. I just was wondering, we've not used the battery with Graham, excuse me, because typically Graham would always have his seizures while he was asleep, but he started having these drop seizures now. And it's never occurred to me before to use the magnet, but we kind of know the time of day, and it's typically maybe sometimes around an hour before he's due for meds in the evening that he can have a seizure. And if he's coming down the stairs or if he's in the bathroom or something like that, if we were to swipe the magnet over his stimulator, could that actually stop a seizure even though we don't know for sure if he was going to have one? But would it be an extra bonus or whatever?
Carrie, I think you should try it.
Yeah, it just never occurred to me. And the other flip side to that, and I know that he doesn't have the right kind of battery to do it automatically, but would that maybe be an option of changing that completely so that it did automatically do that stimulation if his heart rate accelerated or anything?
Well, it's always possible, but good luck convincing Dr. Clark to go into the neck and try and remove that electrode off Graham's neck. That's our limiting factor here, because it's very tricky. Graham's battery has been in his neck lead has been in a long time now.
Yeah.
So it's scarred down on the nerve, and we've done it, but normally we do it when something happens to the electrode, so it's cracked or broken or something happens to it, and then we have a reason to take it off.
Yeah.
But to take it off for that reason, as I said, Dr. Clark would have to be convinced to go in there and do that.
Susan,
Which is that or the corpus callosum, though.
Yeah.
They're not in the same place.
I know.
Susan, is this because it's a dual pin lead?
Yeah.
Okay, so later this year, and I can't give you a date, we will have new technology that can adapt to the older style lead, which means that that wire would not need to come off the nerve. It could be reused if it's still working well. But I can't give you that date. The application is with Health Canada right now, and Health Canada moves at their own pace. So we're optimistic that it will be before the end of the calendar year that we'll be able to offer the newest technology to be applied to older leads, but don't quote me on the date because no one knows right now. But it is coming, which is great news because it means we don't have to change the wire.
Super.
And just going back to your earlier comment about using the magnet, that is something that when we meet with people or their families, we do talk about using the magnet at a time when seizures typically happen. So in advance of that, if seizures occur first thing in the morning, use the magnet first thing when you wake up, and you may be able to possibly prevent a seizure or two. Not all of them, but you may be able to reduce the likelihood.
It never occurred to us. So if he's coming down the stairs, we will start doing it. We've got a massive hole in our wall right now from a very bad fall we had 2 weeks ago, right through the plaster.
Oh my goodness.
And he's had neck injuries and everything else from these drop seizures. So I stupidly never occurred to me, but we have several magnets because we've had several battery replacements. So I'll dig them out.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It might help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is a great question. I'd like to know how if it works, what ends up happening with that. Another question that was sent to me was, when I get my VNS, what kind of effect will it have during exercise?
Great question. I mentioned that it monitors heart rate, and as heart rate goes up, it may trigger stimulation. What the device is looking for is a really sudden change in heart rate. And when you exercise, the heart rate increase is gradual. So the heart rate gradually increases as the exercise gets more and more intense. However, a heart rate increase associated with a seizure is much more of a jump up. It's a rapid startup. And the device is trying to differentiate between those two. So it's possible, but unlikely that it will get fooled by exercise. And even if it is, it's not a big problem. I don't know, Susan, do you want to add something to that?
No, I think you're right. I think that's absolutely right. But I was going to say, listen, powerlifting, okay, let's not do powerlifting. Number one, it's very hard on you to do powerlifting. Number two, I did have a patient who actually tore the lead in his neck from powerlifting. So just don't do that. But everything else is fine and good for you.
Okay. So that's a good question. Mom just thought of a question before she forgets it.
A friend of the family's has that Dr. Ho vibrating thing that you put on your neck. You put the pads on your legs or your shoulder blades, and it sends like a TENS machine. They're getting rid of it because he has a pacer and heart pacer and can't use it anymore. Would that interfere with someone with VNS?
Possibly, depending on where you used it. If it was being used on the feet, unlikely. But if it's being used on the neck, very likely.
Okay.
Cass, somebody asked a question about going through the airport security.
I was just about to get to his.
That'd be me.
Yeah, and it's a very good question. And Deirdre could definitely answer that question, but because she goes through airport security frequently with her VNS. But I think the thing to do, just to be safe, right, is someone else responded that they have a card. You should all have a card. When you receive your battery, you will be given a small card that indicates that you have the battery implanted. It has the serial number of the battery on it. It should have contact information so that if you get in trouble in anywhere, another province, a foreign country, wherever you're traveling, that they can call for medical advice. That card can also be shown when you're going through security, and they can do a pat down. I don't think I've actually never heard of it causing any trouble, but why take a chance? Right? As long as you don't mind being patted down, I frankly quite enjoy it. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. But there's no reason why you can't do that, okay? And Deirdre, can Deirdre just make a comment about that? Okay, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, in answer to your question, yes, I do have a card. I also get a letter from my specialist that says what's implanted there. And I get it renewed every year. Now, one thing that, especially traveling to the United States, that I've had is that they will use that wand. And depending on where you're traveling to, sometimes it will pick up the metal of the device. So then they want to do further pat down. So it's not all the time. I think it depends what airport you're going to, but I think it's as an extra safety precaution. You have the letter, you have your card, and just before they do a pat down, just say I have a medical device, and because it's easier for them to understand, just say it's similar to a cardiac pacemaker, because then they get a clearer picture because they hear of that all the time versus a vagal nerve stimulator. So if you have both, it's better, just because it caught me off guard one time, and then all of a sudden I heard the bells and whistles go off, and then all of a sudden I was escorted to this special area where I had to do like a thorough pat down, and it was not enjoyable. Let's just leave it at that, okay? So my advice to you is carry both.
Oh, and I did have at least one patient who told me that every time she went through the Walmart door, that the thing would go off. Yeah. So I don't know. It checks something. You should have paid for that VNS.
Yeah, it's happened to me too. It has happened to me as well through Walmart, and then I've had to stop and say I did pay for this, so it's something to keep in mind.
Listen, put your card in your wallets, okay? Just carry your card with you the same as you carry your debit card or your driver's license or whatever else you have. Carry that little card with you in your wallet in case there are questions asked.
These are all great questions, guys. I don't have any others right now. If anyone else has some questions that came up or wanna think for a minute.
Is the one from Kevin?
Kevin was saying that his children have used the magnet during a seizure on him. They wanted to learn as soon as it was turned on, and he has a card to use at the airport specifying that he has a VNS. It was more of a kind of like a comment, I think. Thank you, Deidre. Oh, do you have any questions, Emma?
Mm. I think Carrie had another question because she lit up.
Oh, did you have a question, Carrie?
Nope. Nope.
Okay. Oh, another kind of going from Cam here. A kind of like idea what the thing looks like.
No, hold on.
It's just a little thing like that. It's just kind of what the device looks like in person. Very small. I don't know what clock it is. I think that's it. Yeah.
It's just inside the little pocket in the thing, and it just sits right there, and you don't even notice it.
Yeah, I have one question to ask.
Yeah.
Probably this is the last question from my side. I have read the VNS therapy, and one of the most remarkable invention is there for the VNS therapy. So whether the patients who are already for 10 years, more than 10 years on some anti-epileptic drug, so whether this VNS therapy reduces the doses or just cut down the medications of a particular patient.
So changes in medication would occur if the VNS was helpful, right? So if you had a reduction in your seizures and you were carrying a heavy medication load, then your specialist might desire to reduce your doses just a little bit so that you would begin to feel better. Another contribution to increased alertness, right, and improved mood would be changes in your anti-seizure drugs. So yes, for sure, that can happen if the VNS is helpful to you. But obviously it's up to your doctor if he feels it's safe. You're welcome.
That was a good question. These are all good questions, and thank you everybody for sending through your questions and joining in. I just Cameron, Sue, Julie, if there's anything you guys want to do as closing remarks, Maria, you too. Yeah. Or if anyone has any other questions that have popped up, feel free. Other than that, just some closing remarks.
I would just close by saying thank you, Cassidy, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to join you on this call, and it's wonderful to have so many people listening in. So thank you very much for tuning in and listening to this, and thank you, Cassidy, for hosting it. Thank you, Susan, so much for making yourself available. I know your schedule is busy, and it's great to have you available to us as well.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. And you're right, it's crazy here. I can't figure it out at all. I thought during COVID-19 time, like things were supposed to be slowing down, but that is not happening. There was another question, Cass. Somebody, Shauna?
Shauna,
Oh, no, it's not a question.
oh, it's not. So Shauna just said that her daughter had her VNS implanted at the end of October. I'm glad that this was invaluable information. I hope she's doing good with the VNS. I hope everything's going smoothly for you guys. Thank you for sharing that. So to share?
Great news, Shauna. Thank you.
It's great news. Sue, Julie, Maria, any closing remarks?
No, but just make sure you ask questions, okay? Always ask questions. You are your own best advocate. You can do your research. There's lots of information available on the internet regarding vagal nerve stimulation. There's lots of testimonials. You'll obviously want to hear the people who failed as well, because there's not a therapy that we utilize that is 100% effective. It's not. If you're lucky enough to have a resective surgery and the surgery is sufficient to take away the whole seizure focus, then you can be seizure free. But our goal here is to make you the best that we can, okay? And we should use all the tools that we have to try and make your life the best that we can.
Awesome. Thank you guys. When it's all posted, if you guys have any feedback, you're great. Or have any future suggestions for future things you like similar to this you'd like to see or have done, I'm sure we can arrange something. So just let me know. I'm glad it was informative. So many questions. They're so great. I'm glad it went how it went. I'm proud of how it did. I definitely learned lots. I'll have it posted in the next few days for everyone, and those who weren't able to join in can view it. Yeah, you guys did great. Thank you so much for coming in and watching, contributing, and for giving the presentations.
Thanks, Cass.
Thanks, Cassidy. Good to see everyone.
Cassidy.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Just have a good day, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I feel stronger than before. I'm not alone anymore. I look up and you are there. The stars are everywhere.